Hi all, today I'm going to explain about single sign-on authentication in Pega. Single sign-on authentication, the name itself suggests that once user log into an application, the same credentials can be used for other applications for logging in. So, what is the difference between the basic authentication and single sign-on authentication? In the basic authentication, we'll use single user ID and password for logging into an application. And the same password will not be applicable for logging into another application. So we need to use another password for logging into another application. Like that, how many number of applications are there? That many number of passwords will be used for logging into multiple applications. And here the risk of forgetting the password will be very high in basic authentication. And the frustration of the forgot passwords also will be very high. Frustration of the forgot passwords means, for example, when you're trying to log in into an application and you're not able to remember that password, every time you'll click on the forgot password and you'll try to reset your passwords. Like that, if you 10 applications are there, if you forgot for the 4 applications in a day, 4 passwords you have to reset that. That will be like a time consuming process, and also it's more frustration, and also the productivity of a user will be lost. All this is avoided with the help of the single sign-on authentication. The single sign-on authentication helps in two ways. Instead of a person logging into multiple applications with the different credentials, one credential is used for logging into multiple applications. You might get a doubt that what is a generalized example for this? Generalized example for this is, we'll go to this Gmail. I'll explain with the Gmail account. For example, the Gmail, if you try to log in with the Gmail, you can use this same account for not only logging into the Gmail, but also logging into the YouTube, for logging into the Google Drive, all this. Once you log in into the Gmail, the same credentials will be applicable for the YouTube also. The same credentials will be applicable for Google Drive also. So here the frustration of repetitive logins is avoided with the help of the Gmail credentials. So Gmail has set an example for the single sign-on authentication. Just I quickly show how it will works. I'm logging with this Pega Pro CJ videos @gmail.com. I'm giving password and I'm clicking on next. So the Gmail has been logged in. So now I'll go and log in into the YouTube. So what YouTube here is, automatically the YouTube has been logged in with the help of the Pega Pro CJ videos. So this way, this particular Gmail credentials are useful for logging into YouTube. And coming to the pictorial representation between the basic authentication and the single sign-on authentication, you can observe here in the basic authentication, a login, if you want to log in into website 1, and if you want to log in into website 2, there are multiple passwords are required for logging into the multiple websites and multiple websites and multiple domains. But in the single sign-on server, one user ID and password will be used for logging into the multiple websites. You can easily see that one single sign-on will be able to log in into multiple applications. So now let's see the mechanics behind the SAML SSO. What is this SAML SSO? SAML SSO is this is nothing but it's a kind of single sign-on authentication process. This is a full form is security assertion markup language. And generally, most of the time in Pega, they'll be using the SAML authentication mechanism between the service provider and the identity provider. You might get a doubt that what is a service provider and identity provider? I'll try to explain you with the help of a diagram. Here you can observe, for example, a particular user wants to access the Pega application. He has tried to enter the Pega application URL. Once he enters the Pega application URL, the browser URL will direct to the service provider. Here the service provider is nothing but the Pega application. Pega will allow the user to enter into the Pega application and to work in the Pega. But here Pega is not giving direct access, is not following the basic authentication mechanism. Pega is following the single sign-on authentication mechanism. It is believing the identity provider for authentication. It is requesting identity provider for authenticating the user. Once the user is authenticated, the identity provider will send a report to the service provider, that is Pega application, stating that this particular user is a genuine user. You can allow him to enter into the Pega application. Based on the response coming from the identity provider, the Pega application blindly believes the identity provider and allows the user to log in into the application and starts working on the Pega application. So coming to this pictorial representation, first user tries to access the Pega application. Pega is a service provider. Service provider means user wants to log in into the Pega and he wants to launch the applications. He wants to launch the portals. He wants to create a cases. All this he wants to do in the Pega application. But Pega will not directly allow the user to log in and start working and start creating the cases. It will request identity provider Auth0. Here identity provider is Auth0. What is meant by the identity provider? Identity provider here plays a key role in validating the credentials of the user who is trying to log in into the Pega application. Why Pega is not doing the validation part? No. Pega will do the validation part only in the basic authentication mechanism. Currently, we are working on the single sign-on authentication mechanism. So Pega is requesting Auth0 to provide the validation report. So based on the validation report provided by the Auth0, the user will be allowed to log in into the Pega application. Once Pega will send the request, SAML request, this will be sent in the form of a security association markup language. Why it is sent in the form of an XML? It will be sending in the form of an XML format because it will be an encrypted format for the proper security mechanism. When trying to exchange the authentication information between the service provider and identity provider, they want to have a proper security mechanism. So they are trying to send the authentication informations between the service provider authentication identity provider in the form of XML. Once service provider will request identity provider for validation of the Pega user, for the validation of the user who is trying to access the Pega application. Once the validation is done by the Auth0, Auth0 will try to send the report, validation report stating that this particular user is a genuine user. Please allow him to log in. You can allow him to log in into the application. If he's not a genuine user, they'll send the report, same report stating that this is not a genuine user. You cannot allow him. Don't allow him to log in into the application. So based on the response, what is received from the identity provider, the service provider will take a decision whether to allow the user or not. Will take a decision means they'll strictly believe that identity provider itself. Whatever the report sent by the identity provider is the final. They're not going to take any external, their own decision to allow the users. Even the report is not allowing the user to be signed into the application. It will not go against the identity provider. Whatever the identity provider says, service provider will listen. So this is this is a theoretical part. Now, this what is a theoretical part about the basic authentication is, here whenever a user is trying to access the Facebook, he'll ask the Facebook to allow and work on that particular Facebook site. Work on the Facebook site, just they want to post the pictures, or they want to chat with their friends. The user will not be allowed into the Facebook until his credentials are validated. The Facebook is not relying on any other identity provider for validation purpose. It is having their own validation mechanism. Their own database server is having the user ID and password. So user ID, user credentials are validated against the Facebook server credentials. Both are matching. Then the user will be allowed to log in into the Facebook, and user will be allowed to access the content of the Facebook. This is a basic authentication. This is single sign-on authentication. This is a theoretical part till now. We try to uh, know about. Now we'll go into the practical part. How when a user tries to enter the Pega URL, once Pega URL is being entered onto the browser, browser will redirects to the Pega service provider for the allowing the user to log in into the application, and the Pega service provider will not allow immediately the user to log in into the Pega application. It will raise a SAML request and it will send it to the identity provider, and identity provider will request user to provide the login credentials. Once the login credentials are provided by the user, it will validate against the details available in the Auth0 database. Once the details are validated, Auth0 will send a report stating that he's a genuine user. If he is not a genuine user, then the same report also will be sent about the Pega user who is trying to access the Pega application. If he is a genuine user, the service provider will allow the user to log in into the application. If he is not a genuine user, he'll not be allowed to log in into the application. So I'm trying to tell the many times the same thing repeatedly, just because this is the most basic essential thing we should know about. What is the difference between the basic authentication? What is the difference between the SSO authentication? So who is service provider and who is identity provider? Why in basic authentication, service provider and identity provider both are same? Why in service provider, in single sign-on authentication, why service provider and identity provider are different? Because in many organizations, you can't expect that there will be only 1,000 employees or 2,000 employees. In some big organizations like Religare Insurance Company, they'll have 30,000 employees. For that 30,000 employees to maintain the credential information in their database, in the service provider database, is very difficult. So they will maintain in identity provider database. On this particular identity provider database will be helpful in accessing not only Pega applications, multiple applications with the help of the credentials available with the identity provider. One credential will be used for logging into the many applications. So already we had discussed that one single user ID and password can be used to log in into the multiple applications. Similarly, in an organization, in a big organization like many insurance companies and many manufacturing companies, they don't take the risk of having multiple passwords for the many applications, because the passwords there'll be a lot of password issues will be coming every day for the employees. To avoid that password issues, they came up with this authentication process. With this authentication process, we can use single user ID and password for logging into the multiple applications. And coming to the practical part, here, first I'll go to the user ID. First I'll go to the Dev Studio. I'll create an authentication service. Authentication service for the auth identity provider. For auth identity provider, for integration with the auth identity provider. I gone to the sysadmin explorer, records explorer and sysadmin authentication service. I clicked on it. I given the authentication service alias as auth9. It's not necessary that you should give only this name. You can give any name. It's not mandatory that you should give only auth9, auth10, something like that. I'm giving auth20 also. It's not a uh, It's not a issue. And this URL will get reflected here. And here you can see the service provider settings. Service provider here is nothing but the Pega URL. You might get a doubt that generally I'm using a personal edition, but that should start with the local host. But the service provider URLs are everywhere. It is starting with B780. What is this B780? Why I have gone for this kind of values? You can see this kind of junk values will be there. It is not a junk value. Generally, we are using identity provider called as auth provider. What happens? Auth provider is being hosted in the cloud. So if we cloud auth provider needs to access our local host, that is not possible because local host servers is in my personal edition. This is my personal edition. This is local host server. So this is exposed. This particular this URL, localhost URL has been exposed to the internet using the tunnel called as ngrok. This is a tunnel, ngrok tunnel. You can see how you can set up the ngrok tunnel. There are some configurations required for this. Just it's a very directly, you can use this website dashboard.ngrok.com and you can log in. You can find out all the steps that needs to be followed for exposing the local host server to the ngrok tunnel. This will through tunnel that will be exposed to the internet, and once it is exposed to the internet, this dev URL and the OAuth provider will be able to access the dev studio, and this exchange of information between the service provider and identity provider will be smooth process. The process will be very smooth. So there'll be no authentication issues will happens because both are hosted, both are exposed, and both are hosted on the cloud. Now, this is a process you can follow in this site. It is available ngrok http localhost. I'll show you just quickly how I have done it. You can see this is a URL. Just you have to go to the CMDE and you have to give some commands. Whatever they have given in this website, you can follow this. ngrok http localhost 8080. So this is some of the commands are there. Once it is been hosted, you can see this URL. You can see B780. That is the B780 URL. I'm using it for logging into the Pega Dev Studio. Now I'm trying to integrate with the Auth0 identity provider. If I want to integrate with the Auth0 identity provider, first I had to create an authentication service. Once authentication service is being created, I had to do some setup here. What is the setup that needs to be done is, first one is you have to go to this authentication service. I'll try to show from the beginning because instead of using the existing, I had done already one authentication service, Auth9. Instead of using the existing authentication service, I want to show it right from the beginning so that it will be easy to understand. I have given some kind of Auth0. I'll check it out with Auth0 any authentication service. Auth2 is there, Auth4 is there, Auth9 is there. This is I had done it for my practice. So I'll go for Auth0. The naming convention, I can give Auth20, Auth21. There is nothing like any restriction to give the naming convention. Once you click on create and open, the authentication service will get created, but this will not get saved until you provide necessary settings like identity provider metadata. All this settings needs to be provided. These settings can be available in the Auth identity provider portal. I'll show you how to integrate with the Auth identity provider portal. Once I created the authentication service, now I'll go to the Auth identity provider. I'll close this YouTube just for the saying an example how this single sign-on Gmail credentials will be useful for logging into the Gmail and also to logging into the YouTube. I have opened that two sites, Gmail site and the YouTube site. I have closed both the sites. Currently, we don't require for our example explanation. Now, I will try to log in with the website within already I have login credentials. You can sign up. You can use the sign up button and you can provide your email IDs and you can log in. I have already logged in. So I'm just giving my user ID and password. Once I'm logging in, I had to do two things. One is user management. Second is I need to create an SAML application for integration with the Pega Dev Studio. So creating the users, I told you already that Pega will not do the authentication validation of the users. It will straightly bill the identity providers for the validation purpose. So whenever any user, external user, any user trying to access the Pega application, Pega will not validate the user ID and password. It straight away go and ask the identity provider to validate that particular user ID and password. So that particular user should be available in this, that particular user should be available in this identity provider, Auth0 identity provider. So I'm creating the users, create user. First, I will create one user, Pega Pro CJ videos. I'll provide a mail ID also. I'll provide a mail ID also. I'll try to repeat the points also. Don't worry, because it's not that easy to grasp at first point, first attempt only. Just if you, I'll be repeating some points, some very key points oftenly, so that that will be easily memorized, so that next time you can relate it when you're trying to practice in your systems. So when I click on create, the user has been created. Once a user has been created, what I will do is I'll go and create an application. This is like a regular application. I'll create it, regular web application. I will give the name of the application. You can give any name of the application. I'm giving as Auth0 integration. So I'll click on create. Once I click on create, I'll go on, click on add-ons. Here you have to provide the SAML to web app. SAML to web app means why I have taken that particular add-on is instead of taking the add-on of WS Fed web app, because here we are discussing about the authentication mechanism between the Pega application and identity provider through SAML SSO, Security Assertion Markup Language. The authentication information will be exchanged between the service provider and identity provider in the form of an XML. So this exchanging of XML information between the service provider and identity provider will happens with the help of the SAML SSO. That's why I'm trying to generate a SAML file, SAML metadata for the identity provider. So what I'll do is SAML protocol. These are the configuration parameters for the SAML integration between the service provider and identity provider. So just because we are focusing on the integration of the SAML integration, SAML SSO integration between the Pega application and Auth0 identity provider, the protocol what we are following is SAML protocol. We are not following the other protocol WebFed, or we are not following any OpenID protocols. We are following the SAML protocols. That's why I have enabled that SAML. So once I have enabled it, application callback URL. So what is application callback URL is, if you go to the service provider settings, you can see this is Assertion Consumer Service location. This is the application callback URL. You can take it, this one, and go to this particular auth identity provider, SAML to web app. And once you give this, go to the usage, click on download. Once you downloaded that, go to the settings, click on enable. Once you have clicked on enabled, you have enabled the SAML authentication for this particular application. Now this has been enabled and metadata also has been downloaded. What this metadata will do is identity provider metadata contains the trust key store instances. So it is trying to authenticate the SAML request coming from the service provider. So all the identity provider information should also be available in this service provider. To which identity provider they have to send the SAML request. All this information also should be available with this. Not only we have provided the ACS URL, service provider URL, we have to have the information related to identity provider also. Then only the synchronization will happens between the service provider and identity provider. So what I will do is I will import the metadata. I'll click on this via file, choose file, downloads, click on it, open, submit. So this metadata, whatever related to the identity provider gets copied here. You can also see the digitally signed certificate. Digitally signed certificate. This is a trust key store instances, which is like an authentication passwords. This is like an authentication password, which gives a strong security for exchange of information between the service provider and identity provider. And once this is been imported, identity provider data settings been imported, what we will do is we will try to model the operator. Already there is an operator available in Pega, CJ at the rate of Pega Pro. This is an operator available in Pega. For the attributes, whatever there for this particular operator will be cloned from the operator which is coming from an external provider, from an identity provider. What I mean to say is, for example, a new user wants to log in into the Pega application, but his operator ID is not in the Pega application, but his operator ID is available. The user is available in the identity provider. Just now I have created one user here. That user, if you see this in the user management, in the users, I have created an operator Pega Pro CJ videos at the rate of gmail.com. This particular user is not available in the in this dev studio. You can also search for this particular user. He will not be available. No result is found. So I want have a model operator. I want to copy the attributes of that model operator to this particular new operator that is going to get created with the help of the Auth0 identity provider. So I provided a model operator. The operator that will be cloned, afterwards, that will be cloned, and there will be a disable signing process will be there. One option. I am trying to click on save. So now almost we provided all the settings that is related to the service provider. Settings we have provided in the Auth0 identity provider. URLs, that is here we have provided the callback URL, application callback URL, that is service provider URL. In this Auth0 integration we have provided here. I mean, like which particular service provider they have to authenticate. That information, that related URL information is available in this particular application. In this particular designer studio, also we have imported the IDP settings. So I will take Just I'll give some kind of description. You can give any description. It's a test. So that's why I mentioned it as Auth0. I am not giving detailed description about it. And I told you already there should be an alias needs to be given. I'm giving it as Auth0. You can give Auth20 also. It's not a problem. I'll click on save. So almost many issues will go away. One issue is signing certificate for the service provider must be specified unless request signing has been disabled. We are not providing any signing certificate. We are not uploading any kind of security certificate. So I am disabling that signing certificate. We are not uploading any signing certificate from the service provider side. That's why I'm disabling the signing certificate. If we have provided some kind of digitally signed document here, then we don't need to disable that. I didn't provide any digitally signed document here. So there is no sign-in certificate is there. Okay, now authentication configuration is ready. Now I'll try to create an operator ID. I'll take this URL. I'll try to create an operator ID. I'll take this URL. So what I will do is I will try to paste this here. And what I will do is I don't need all the configuration also done from Auth0 identity provider side also. The configuration is done from the service provider side and the configuration is done from the identity provider side. From the service provider side, I created an authentication service and all the necessary URLs, all the necessary metadata I have imported related to identity provider. Even in the identity provider side also, I have done the user management. I added the user. I have also added the application. I created an application and mentioned the service provider URL also in that particular application. So all the configurations are completed now. I want to create an operator ID name PegaPro CJ videos. PegaPro CJ videos is the operator ID. So this operator ID is not available in the Pega Designer Studio. I want to create an operator ID in the Pega Designer Studio. Okay. What I will do is I will try to create it by using the Auth0 identity provider. How I'm going to create it by using the Auth0 identity provider is I'll try to give with a proper SAML tracer. I'll use a SAML tracer for this and how this cloning is happening. I'll show you. So coming to this, I logged out from this Auth0 identity provider and I provided the URL. What is mentioned here? I have taken the login URL. Login URL is available here. Once the user clicks on the SSO login URL of the Auth0, once he provides the user ID and password, which is available in the Auth0 identity provider. So this particular user ID is not available in the Pega Designer Studio. It is available with the identity provider. So whatever the password available in the identity provider, I'm trying to give here. With the same operator ID and the attributes will be cloned from the Pega model operator. So I want to show the SAML tracer also. So what I will do is I'll go to the Google Chrome and I'll try to give this copy because I want to enable the SAML tracer. In the incognito mode, I'm not able to get the SAML tracer. So what I will do is I'll try to log out. I'll try to log out of this application also. I don't want Pega application also currently. I'll log out from the mgrok. I try to open it just because I want to show you folks regarding that. So what I will do is I'll log off from all this Designer Studio applications. So I will open and I'll try to click on this. So repeatedly it is showing that application only. So I want to take that URL. Sorry, I'll take a, there is a issue here. There is a, I think cookies are having this, that is a cache is having that operator ID being stored. So what I will do is I will again open the Google Chrome and I'll try to log in into the application. So what the URL I have used it, I'm using the same URL here now. Now it is asking for the user credentials with what user ID the operator should be created into the Pega Designer Studio. Now, whatever the operator ID which is available in the Auth0 identity provider, I'm using the same credentials. I'm clicking on continue. Once I clicked on continue, it will enter into the Auth0 identity provider. Auth0 identity provider. So I didn't enable the SAML tracer. I must have enabled the SAML tracer, but let's see how post response is coming or not. I doubt the, I want to see the, I want to show the post response to you folks. Post response to you folks, but I think it is got created. Why I want to show the post response is when I shift to the Dev Studio, if I go and open the operator ID, you can see a junk value will be created for the operator ID. Why the junk value will be created is this, if you see this, it should be created with the operator ID, user ID and password. But it is creating with the 65E23, some kind of junk value is getting created. Why it is being created is this is nothing but the name ID. Name ID is getting created. So what I will do is this time what I will do is I'll clear all this. I will delete it. Again, I'll try to create an operator ID and enable the SAML tracer. So it might be a repeating task, but by seeing this, you can easily, repeat it. There is no need to again uh, memorize this. Now only by kind of trial and error methods, you will also learn a lot. So I'll try to log in. I will try to clear all this. So I'll close this SAML tracer here. And again, I'll open the Google Chrome. Open the Google Chrome. I will provide the URL. Now, I will again give the user ID and password which is available in the identity provider. Now I'll enable the SAML tracer. I'll click on it. I will give this password. Once I click on the password, you can see that SAML tracer will be posting the response. What is the response which is being sent to the Pega Designer Studio? You can see that information is available here. So here the SAML response, everything is being available here. I told you, right? Earlier there was a junk value was coming. What is the reason for the junk value? The reason for the junk value is there will be a namespace value will be there, name ID value. Name ID value. What you can see, you can also observe this name ID value. So here, if you see this, this is an ID value. This is a value. This is attribute value, name value, name identifier. Name identifier is being cloned for this operator ID. I want to use a mail ID for cloning for creating as an operator ID. I don't want this junk values to be created. That will be a lot of confusion for the users. So to avoid it, so I will try to clone it to the email ID, not to the name identifier. I'll try to clone it to the email address. So for this one, what I will do is I will take this attribute, SAML attribute, and I'll try to create, I'll go to the operator ID and I'll delete it. Again, I'll try to delete it. because I didn't add, why I'm using the same operator ID, I'm deleting it. Why can't I use a new user for creating an operator ID? I can do it as a, for example, instead of Pega Pro CJ videos, Pega Pro some MJ videos, Pega Pro RJ videos with the different operators, Pega Infinity at the rate of gmail.com. You can create it with the different user IDs. You can try to create a operator IDs into the Pega Designer Studio. You can do it. But that same user should be available in the Auth0 identity provider. In the Auth0 identity provider, initially I have tried to do the user management. There I have added the users. There I have added only one user. That is Pega Pro CJ videos. That's why I'm using the same operator ID repeatedly. I'm trying to use this for creating the operator IDs into the Designer Studio. Now, yeah, you can also test that from your side. You do some kind of small POC, then you can learn a lot. So what I have done is I'm trying to, instead of cloning it to the name identifier, I'll try to clone it to the email ID. So what I have copied is I'll paste here the email address and I'll try to map it. Mapping here, mapping to the email address. So what is the attributes will be there for email addresses? For example, if I go to the email operator, live UI, py address of email dot email address is a particular mapping that needs to be done. I mean, like with that email address, with that particular email value, the operator ID will get created. So this I'm trying to show it point by point very detailedly, just because you will be not get stuck when you are trying to do a POC on this by seeing this video. It will be easy for you if you follow the same points, whatever I'm doing it, where I'm getting the email address. To with the help of this mapping, I'll be able to create an operator ID with this email address instead of getting created with the name identifier. I told you, right? I showed you that there was junk value was there. This is a junk value. This is a 65. This is a name identifier. The next time when you try to create an operator ID, when you're using the URL, SAML URL, it will not get created with this junk value. It will get created with this operator ID, with this email ID. So with this email ID, the mapping also been done. Once the mapping is done, what I will do is I will delete it. This one. I don't need this operator ID because I want to create Pega Pro CJ videos. I already told you, you can create n number of users in the identity provider and you can start experimenting with the different users creation into the Pega Designer Studio. I'm using only single user and I'm trying to experiment that. You can use multiple users creation in the user management and you can start experimenting that. So what I'll do is I'll log off and again, I will close this SAML tracer. I don't need the SAML tracer now. Just directly I'll try to create an operator ID with the help of the user management which is available. Currently, what is there is, I'll take this URL by PR web by PR. This is a URL. So I will try to Pega Pro CJ videos at the rate of gmail.com. I'll give the password. Once I have given the password, that will create an operator ID in the Dev Studio. So in the Dev Studio, you can see the operator ID getting created with the email ID instead of the namespace identifier. So I will switch to the Dev Studio. Just we'll have a quick check whether it is created with the proper email ID or with the namespace identifier. It is taking bit time to load because of it's a new creation, operator ID creation, and all the attributes needs to be mapped. So a cloned operator is there already. That attributes will get map to this. So for example, full name CJ at the rate of Pega Pro. If you go and see the CJ at the rate of Pega Pro, whatever the full name is there, that is getting mapped to this Pega Pro CJ videos. And you might have observed that there is no junk value. It is creating with the operator ID, because this will not give any confusion for anyone. And this got created with the email ID. And this full name is there for the CJ Authorita Pega Pro for the model operator. The saying got cloned to the full name. If you want to change it, you can change it. It's not necessary that you should not change it. And whatever the access group is there for the CJ Authorita Pega Pro, that gets cloned. So like this, the cloning will happens for this model, from this model operator to a newly created operator. And all these steps, you might get a doubt. The steps, whatever I have shown in this particular figure, like user enters the, only you have seen user entering the URL to access the Pega application. Once user enters the Pega application, all this URL related Pega application, once he entered it, how much time it has taken to log in into the Designer Studio. This they were not able to see this until SAML tracer is enabled. They were not able to see the SAML request and response. This will all happens in the backend. It will not be visible for the user until he adds an extension related to the SAML tracer. Whatever the SAML tracer is enabled, then only he will be able to see what is the SAML request and what is the SAML response. Otherwise, once the user enters the user ID and password, all this authentication will happens in the backend only. It will not appears in the front end, and it will happens in a fraction of seconds. All the report will be sent by the identity provider. You will not be able to see the report sent by the identity provider. This user is a valid user. You can allow him to log in into the Pega application. You can allow him to access the Pega application. All these kind of reports cannot be seen by the front end user. Only if he enables the SAML tracer, that will be shown in the backend. There will be loggers also will be there. So that loggers information we can discuss in the later video. Yeah, and related to the basic authentication also, there was an other video was there already. Already I have uploaded that video. You can see that a video for more information on the basic authentication. And this is the information about the SSO authentication. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching. Thank you. Bye.